Hello everyone, and welcome back to Replay, the show where games are art. We're back with more Final Fantasy VI, and today we're now nearly to the end of the game. Just a few things left to do, starting with a series of Easter eggs, Shadow's Dreams. To start the sequence, we need to sleep at the inn in the Colosseum with Shadow in the party, triggering his first dream. In this dream, someone named Barum tells someone named Clyde to come find him. This is Shadow's dream, a message from his subconscious and from his past. Something, perhaps the trauma of the end of the world, or seeing Realm again, or just being around the party, has enabled Shadow to begin to reconnect to his past. If only in this subconscious form. Okay, after some experimenting, it looks like you can't get Shadow's Dream at any of the free inns, or at least I didn't after several tries at each, so I'm trying the cheapest pay inn, South Figaro. And here's the second dream, setting up the story. Barum and Clyde were train robbers together, making a big score in what looks like the Phantom Forest. Though remember, Doma had a rail network prior to war with the Empire, so it could be that. Barum and Clyde being famous robbers sounds a little like Bonnie and Clyde, the famous bank-robbing duo, which has some curious implications. Was Barum not just Clyde's partner and friend, but his lover? Could be. Regardless, they were clearly close. Also note what their gang was called, the Shadow Bandits. Clearly, Shadow got his name here. In Shadow's third dream, we see that it all went wrong. It's a classic scene. The enemy are closing in, and the injured man begs his companion to leave him behind. Usually the companion refuses, but Clyde actually accedes to Barum's wishes. Partially. Barum is afraid of what'll be done to him if he's captured, and so he begs to be killed, but Clyde doesn't have the guts and leaves him behind. This fueled a lot of fan speculation. Might Barum be a character we see elsewhere in the game? Perhaps he was experimented on by his captors and came out strange? The most common fan speculations back in the day were Gogo and Siegfried, since their faces are covered and their origins mysterious. Also, the Come Find Me dream only happens at the Colosseum, which is also where Siegfried hangs out. Also, Barum in this dream used the injured returner sprite, leading some to speculate the robbers were working with the returners. This speculation is largely irrelevant. What really matters here is that Clyde couldn't kill Barum, his friend, and is racked with guilt because of that. He cared too much and ended up hurting both himself and his friend because of it. The fourth dream is pretty much just connecting the threads of the third and fifth. Clyde stumbles into Thamasa and is saved by a woman. Sadly, I wasn't able to get the fifth dream. It shows Clyde leaving a house in Thamasa. Realm and Strago's house. A dog comes after him. He tells it to stay behind and take care of the girl, but after he leaves, it follows him. The point of these dreams is to give us Shadow's backstory and motivation, confirming what was already hinted at by the fact that Interceptor likes Realm, and Shadow is able to equip the memento ring Realm starts with, which represents her mother's love. Shadow is Realm's father, and the woman who saved him is probably her mother, Strago's daughter. But Shadow abandoned them because he runs from feelings he can't handle. For all that he's the silent badass, really he lives in perpetual fear. It's all an act. False detachment to cover over a fear of attachment, a fear of loving and losing. Shadow is fearless in the face of physical danger, but a coward when it comes to the possibility of failing someone he loves. He'd rather just leave them behind before they can see his weakness, the shameful weakness that made him unable to kill his best friend. Also, Clyde is a hilariously dorky name for the badass uber ninja. The next Easter egg I want to get is Gau-centric. In the world of Balance, there was this old man in a solitary house near where Sabin woke up after falling into the Leet River. He would trick you into stuff like touching a hot stove by asking for help fixing things. Now Sabin thinks he's Gau's dad because... reasons? Anyway, come back with a party that has both Gau and Sabin, and he says basically the same things, but this time the party decides to confront him about Gau. But first, it's time for a makeover! This is a very silly little sequence, characters arguing over etiquette and how to dress him. I love Setzer and Locke trying to impose their own idiosyncratic styles, only to be shot down by the rest of the party. When we actually confront him, however, things get sad, as for once Gau's poignant theme matches what's happening. His father refuses to acknowledge him, talking instead about dreams of a demon child that he encountered and left on the veldt. The strong implication is that Gau's mother died in childbirth, and Gau's father was so upset he detached completely from reality, decided Gau was a monster, and took him to the Veldt to live with the other monsters. Yet, after this awful rejection, Gau's just happy his dad's alive. It is a heartbreaking moment of stunning forgiveness by a character who, as I've said before, I usually don't care for. But this is beautiful. I'm generally not a fan of the idea that abused or abandoned children have a responsibility to forgive their parents, but I'm just going to let this scene stand as is. So, I've done a few hours of grinding now. I learned a ton of magic on the lower floors of Fanatic's Tower, then spent some time with Gau, Realm, and Strago learning rages and lores on the Veldt. Now I'm going to tackle the last dragon outside the final dungeon, the Dirt Dragon. I equipped Gaia gear, which heals earth damage, and as you can see between that and how hard my main party hits, he goes down easy. I love the absurdity of bouncing across the orchestra and audience's heads after the fight. Also, there's a pretty entertaining little pun here. We fight the Dirt Dragon, the Dragon of Earth, on a stage. Didn't somebody once say, all the world is a stage, the Earth itself is the stage on which our story unfolds? It's a cute pun. Now that that's out of the way, time for some level grinding. Dinosaur Forest is a good place for XP since there are only 3 possible encounters. a lone Tyrannosaur, 2 Tyrannosaurs, or a Brachiosaur. All give good XP, while the Tyrannosaurs drop Imp Halberds, which are crappy equipment unless you are an Imp and have the full equipment set, but that's not worth it. However, they're the best item in the game to use with the throw command. Brachiosaur, meanwhile, is the most powerful non-boss enemy in the game. Good for a test of how tough my party is, if nothing else. Luckily, the party I encountered this one with is quite tough. I think I may have talked about it many episodes ago, but in case I didn't, or as a refresher if I did, leveling up works very strangely in FF6. Character stats do not improve when they level up. Instead, level of both attacker and defender are used as part of the calculation for damage on any attack, in addition to the relevant stats, which vary from character to character. For example, Relm has the highest magic stat in the game and a very high speed, so she's the best offensive caster, but her low defense makes her vulnerable. Now, like I said, these stats normally do not increase when leveling. However, certain espers give a bonus to a stat on level up. If you gain a level while that esper is equipped, the stat permanently increases for that character. This really hammers home how much stronger having an esper makes you. Even a pure physical fighter can become massively more powerful by equipping espers that increase physical attack and defense. So basically, a hugely important part of grinding is making sure that your characters have the right espers equipped as they level. So I'm now satisfied with my grinding, and it's time to tackle the final dungeon, Kefka's Tower. As the characters discuss, the statues, the source of the world's magic, are somewhere in there. If we destroy them, magic will be gone and Kefka's power with it, but it also means the espers will no longer be able to exist in this world. So what about Terra? No answer yet. I have to form 3 parties, so one of my magical girls will lead each. I've somewhat neglected Celeste compared to the other 2, so one of my best rounded characters, Mog, will go with her. Terra is my most powerful character, especially in magic, so I'll put the weakest magic-based character, Strago, on her team. I'll have Gau on that team too. Morph, Rage, and Lore together give the party a nice monster powers theme. I'll put Locke with Celeste because shipping, Shadow with Relm because family. Edgar and Sabin should also go together because family, which means they have to go with Relm. Terra's group is a bit lacking in physical combat, so I'll put my best fighters, Cyan with her, leaving Setzer with Celeste. I'm leaving out Umaro and Gogo because their inability to equip espers means I couldn't effectively grind them, so they're a bit underpowered now. This split into 3 groups calls back to the first real player-controlled battle of the game, the first time we had real freedom of motion. Locke and the Moogles versus the Narsh soldiers. These outer areas of the tower are also quite reminiscent of the floating continent. It's darker and redder, but otherwise the rock formations look quite similar. Which makes sense. The crashed remnants of that continent would be attractive to Kefka's sense of humor as a place to build his castle. We're also fighting some classic late-game Final Fantasy enemies here. The evil Oscars are Marlboros, a recurring plant-like enemy throughout the series. named for the cigarette company that uses their bad breath attack to inflict multiple status ailments on the entire party. We've also got the last form of the Behemoth, another classic late-game Final Fantasy encounter. Once inside, we find something very reminiscent of Vector, which again makes sense. Kefka's Tower is located where Vector should be, built atop its ruins. But here we have a literal location from Vector, the cells where we found Kefka during the dinner with Gestahl. And located right where Kefka was standing then, is a monster that looks very familiar, again harking back to the floated continent. There, we fought the monster Atma weapon, created, like the sword Terra is still equipped with, from the power of the ancient being Atma. And here is Atma, so what is it? In later games, this is translated as Ultima, the ultimate being or monster. It claims to be a creature from the dawn of time, presumably predating the War of the Magi, where both Atma weapons date back to that war. Perhaps Atma is related somehow to the older war between the goddesses, a kind of primordial magitech from which the Espers developed. On the other hand, Atma or Atman is the true self or soul in Hindu and Buddhist belief, that which is passed on in reincarnation. An Atma weapon scales with its wielder's power. Perhaps this Atma, this ancient being of pure energy, is the essence of the soul itself, or at least tapped into that power. Ultimately, who knows? It's a bit of a mystery, which in its own way is nice to have. Two of the 8 dragons are hiding in Kefka's Tower itself. This is one of them, the Gold Dragon, essentially a palette swap of Brachiosaur. It's electric-themed, not to be confused with the wind-themed Storm Dragon or the electric and water-themed Blue Dragon. This one's actually weak to water. Unfortunately, water attacks are hard to come by, so I'm sticking to non-elemental attacks. In the end, it puts up more of a fight than dirt, but still goes down pretty easily. The boss Inferno ambushes us, unlike other bosses who just sit in the path. It's an interesting touch that goes well with its slightly ninja-y map sprite. In combat, however, it's much more mechanical. To me, it looks like a leftover weapon from the Magitech lab, which this area of Kefka's Tower appears to be built from. Atomic Ray is a Magitech attack, and its physical attacks use the circling propeller animation often used by Magitech enemies, so it seems likely. It could be Magitech brought to quasi-life with Kefka or the goddess's magic, or perhaps it's Magitech on the verge of becoming a new Esper? Which I should perhaps talk about a bit, since the Espers are mostly implied to be humans that fought for the Warring Triad in their ancient war, and got transformed into a race of magical creatures. But as I've mentioned before, the opening animation to the PlayStation version of FF6 has magic-infused Magitech acting very nearly alive. An Atma weapon, a machine made during the War of the Magi, appears fully sapient and was hanging out on the floating continent, which is the Esper world pulled into the human realm. So this magic-infused mechanical weapon was sapient and living in the Esper world? Sounds like an Esper to me. Of course, the other possibility is that Inferno is a human, transformed and augmented by experiments in the Magitech lab or Kefka's magic. Maybe both. Hey, maybe it's Barum. I like this landworm enemy. Its similarity to the worms that lead to Gogo's cave implies that it's connected to something bigger beneath, but if it eats us all, we just die. The implication is that we're being devoured by some great beast lurking within the tower and extending its worm-like mouth tentacles out. But there's nothing like that in the tower. Too bad, it would have been interesting Lovecraftian, and hence a good fit for this descent into the source of the world's chaos. And here's the last dragon, the Skull Dragon. It's undead, which is at least somewhat interesting. It raises the question of whether it was always undead, associated with death the way the White Dragon is with Holy or the Dirt Dragon with Earth. Or perhaps it was once a regular dragon, but when it died, the necessity of sealing away Crusader and the great power inherent in a dragon kept its corpse going. Either way, it's not too bad of a fight. It's got the typical undead attacks and weaknesses, though stat-wise it's actually poison elemental rather than undead. So you can't instantly kill it with a Phoenix down, and it isn't hurt by healing spells. But it's still got the typical undead weaknesses to fire and holy, so Mog's Holy Elemental Lance is handy here. Now that all the dragons are dead, we get Crusader. It's basically useless. It teaches Meteor, which is less powerful than Ultima, and Merton, which harms our party as well as the enemies. Same goes for using it as a summons. It harms everyone on the battlefield. A lot. But it's yet another instance of a triad, 2 males and a female rather like the statues. There are actually quite a lot of powerful trios in this game. The statues, the 3 magical girl party members, Terra and her parents, of course the 3 main elements of magic, fire, bolt, and ice, which are in almost every Final Fantasy game. There are also 3 paths in this final dungeon, and 3 branches of the story after we met the Returners. It's interesting that a game so much about duality has so many 3s, but then this is a game about breaking out of dualities. 3 represents the 2 extremes and the point of balance between them. The 2 sides of a dilemma and the 3rd path that resolves it, the 2 opposing forces in the unified whole that combines them. It's fitting, then, that the last Esper in the game is 3 Espers in 1, just as the statues were 3 in 1 before Kefka separated and unbalanced them. Indeed, Crusader is most likely meant as a reflection of the statues themselves, its indiscriminate damage to everyone on the battlefield recalling the way the conflict between the statues threatened destruction to everyone on all sides of their war. This is the penultimate, and in my opinion, coolest puzzle in Kefka's Tower, and hence the game. I like it because it requires all three parties to work together. Basically, Realm and Celeste stand on switches on either side to open the way for Terra. Who can then drop a weight on Realm switch to open the path for her. Realm then drops a similar weight to allow Celeste to go up the middle. Then, all three stand on these three switches to open the way for Celeste's group, to go down and open the way for Terra's group, to go up and face the first of the statues, Doom. In other words, the only way to reach the Warring Triad is for this trio to cooperate. So, Doom. In the concept art for these battle sprites of the statues, they're each associated with a figure from a different mystical tradition. Doom is associated with the Sephiroth from Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism. In Kabbalah, the Sephiroth are the path by which the divine light entered and blessed this world of darkness, and hence the path by which the contemplative seeker can ascend to commune with the divine. Doom also uses ice, which is interesting, the element we've associated with order and mirroring, with duality and with Celeste. Kabbalah is a dualistic tradition, being all about light and darkness, and following the path of light up out of the darkness. Celeste began in darkness in multiple senses. Chronologically, she started out as an Imperial experimental subject in general. In gameplay, she was first encountered imprisoned in a dungeon, and at the time her most useful ability was negative. She could negate magic like darkness negates light. And in the world of Ruin, she began in utter suicidal despair, the darkest of circumstances. But from that darkness, she has ascended into light, leaving the Empire for the Returners, coming up out of the dungeon to serve as the key for the party to meet Setzer and reach the skies above, and leaving behind despair in newfound determination as the leader of the effort to reassemble the scattered party. It should be no surprise that she's the only character who can learn Pearl, the game's only holy elemental spell, unassisted. This has always bugged me, having to fight Guardian in the middle of the statues. It makes more sense for it to have been guarding the last switch before you open the path to the statues. But oh well. This is the same Magitech that showed up a few times in the World of Balance. For example, if you try to leave Thomasa when playing as General Leo. Back then, it was a literally impossible fight. The Guardian could not be beaten. But we are much stronger now than then, and so the Guardian here is just a boss battle, and a pretty easy one compared to the statues. Once past Guardian, we reach the next statue, Goddess. Goddess's concept art associates her with Sophia, a figure from Gnosticism. Gnosticism was an early form of Christianity which came to be regarded as a heresy. Among other things, it taught that the material universe was not made by the true god, but rather an evil entity, a demiurge called Yaldabaoth. It trapped Sophia, the divine spirit of wisdom, within the material world, where she became the soul. Gnosticism promises the true knowledge which allows a soul to escape the prison of materiality. With the goal that eventually the world will end, the last souls will escape, and Sophia will be free. It is an ethereal, matter-denying tradition, regarding this existence as merely a prison in which we are confined. Thus, Goddess uses lightning as her element, the heavenly element, detached from the world and striking against it. Note that it is not the specialty of any character. Neither Celeste nor Terra learns bolt spells naturally, and they are the only characters who learn spells naturally. Again, Goddess is detached, aloof. But she is the only woman of the triad, and therefore in that sense connected to all three magical girls. She is Sophia, the feminine essence of wisdom, the empowering knowledge that all our characters seek. But our characters aren't seeking detachment or escape from this world. They're opposed to Goddess, seeking to attach themselves more to this world, to bind themselves with various forms of love. For beating Goddess, we get Excalibur, appropriately enough. Though many people make the error of thinking Excalibur is the sword in the stone, after all, that's a sword that marked Arthur as king, and Excalibur is famously his sword, it's actually not. In most Arthurian legend, Excalibur is given to Arthur by the Lady in the Lake, another feminine incarnation of wisdom. It's a good sword, but not Atma weapon or Skyrender good. I usually give it to Celeste or Edgar. The last of the statues is Poltergeist, associated with the element of fire, which we've commented on before as the element of chaos. The concept art, however, associates the statue with Zurvan, a god who brings together opposites. In Zurvanism, an offshoot of Zoroastrianism, he is the supreme being of time and space, the transcendental, neutral progenitor of both the ultimate good, Ahura Mazda, and the absolute evil, Angara Mainyu. All things are one in him, just as Terra is both Esper and human, and, like him, associated with fire. Yet despite fire being the essence of chaos, Zurvan is a god of balance, two more opposites drawn together. All of this is foreshadowing both that all this chaos will lead to a better balance, and that the chaos within Terra will, ultimately, be balanced. And, with the statues destroyed, magic fails utterly to disappear from the world. Kefka has usurped their power. If we are to restore balance, we must face him. Next time on the finale of Replay Final Fantasy VI. Bye!
Hope you all enjoyed that. If you did, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. If you want some more videos right away, you can hop over to my Patreon and see them there. Got other goodies there, blog posts, ability to commission videos. Feel free to check it out. Bye!